Welcome back to another edition of the Good Eye Podcast. I'm Jason Mack, your host, and this is a platform for positivity. Doesn't mean we're always excessively positive, but we try. Basically, just trying to put some positive stuff into the universe, as it were. There's plenty of bad news to be found, so we try to put some good news back out there. And also address issues of curiosity, nonprofits, health, wellness, subjects like that. Under which all of those, my next guest and her organization fall. I'm talking to Susanna Calvert of the Foundation for Family and Community Healing, which is it's a long name, but a brief description for all the work that they do. So let's get into it, and we'll talk about some of the programs that Susanna and her organization feature, and how she is basically trying to empower everyone to create healthy, positive, rewarding relationships with ourselves, each other, Earth, and the loving force greater than ourselves. That's their mission statement. So let's do it. This is my conversation with Susanna Calvert of the Foundation for Family and Community Healing on the Good Eye Podcast. And welcome to another edition of the Good Eye Podcast. I'm Jay Smack. And today my guest is Susanna Calvert of the Foundation for Family and Community Healing. Susanna, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Jay. Thank you for having me. I'm so grateful to be here with you today.
Well, it's really cool. You reached out to me, and I know we had met a couple times in various meetings, Synapse, and we have some mutual friends. But looking at everything that you do, and I imagine only really some of that is captured on the website for the Foundation for Family and Community Healing. But it's really deep as far as all the stuff you're into. So I'm going to let you take the lead, first of all, and talk about what the Foundation for Family and Community Healing does, some of the services you provide, some of the missions you're trying to accomplish, and then we'll just kind of have a conversation and kind of talk shop a little bit, if that's okay.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much for the opportunity. So the Foundation for Family and Community Healing is seeking to address the challenges that we know that people, families, and communities are facing all over the world with anxiety, depression, loneliness, conflict that were rampant even before the pandemic and have only just gotten worse. And so many of these problems we sense have to do with what I feel to be is like a lack of skills in how we can create good mental, emotional, and relationship health, starting with ourselves, and then so that we can create those relationships with each other and Earth as well. And our workplaces and schools are teaching this to some degree, but some of the skills that underlie our ability to be successful in schools and workplaces are just fall through the cracks. So in other words, what do we need to know to be successful citizens of humanity and Earth, not just our schools and workplaces? So it's that gap that we are seeking to fill, and not just with content knowledge, because after 26 years as an educator in higher education, I know that so much of what we learn is sort of philosophical or factual, but don't also walk us through the step-by-step things we need to do to create changes in our life. So we also help learners walk step-by-step through behavioral change that can help them transform their lives so that they can thrive and we can all thrive together as families and communities, but also with Earth. So we have this online interactive platform. It's really beautiful. It focuses on this whole spectrum of skills that I feel that we need for youth and adults. And we also offer it on a gift economy because we know that these challenges and opportunities are not limited to people with economic means. So we offer it to everybody and just ask people to pay what they are able. It's available 24/7 to anybody with a smartphone or an internet browser and on a growing array of topics. It's suitable for people to do by themselves, in pairs, maybe a mentor-mentee, employer-employee, parent-child, or in groups, whether it be in a classroom, a workplace, a community organization, wherever. So it's a very flexible product, and I believe is the solution that everybody needs now, so that we can create the lives that we're all looking to have.
Well, you mentioned the fact that students at whatever age don't really get a lot of guidance when it comes to understanding relationships and self-awareness and self-care. If it were a classroom setting, like you mentioned, and I'm looking at the website now, and I assume some of the stuff you're talking about is under your learning modules
That's right.
section under HERD, Healing, Education, and Relationship Development. And some of the subjects are relationship well-being for adults, for youth, intergenerational, reducing your carbon footprint. Do you also offer, say, criteria or suggestions on how to move through that course if it is a classroom setting?
The modules are all set up as groups of lessons, and they range in size from 5 or 6 lessons to maybe 12 or 13. And each lesson is designed to be 20 to maybe 30 minutes in length if you were to go through it, on your own, or go through it on average. But it can be longer or shorter depending on how fast you move through the reflection and discussion exercises. And they're also designed, the ones that are encouraging behavioral change, benefit from having time to practice and experiment with that skill in between. So we tend to explain that in the beginning of each module so that a teacher, educator, or facilitator can then incorporate it in however makes sense. But, they're also conducive to just going through in a day-long retreat or something like that. I think that's less ideal because you don't have that time to practice, but sometimes that's a better format. And learners can pick and choose what's most important and go from there, which is fine too. People could also just pick and choose lessons. Maybe they just want to have a quick workshop or just do a 2 or 3 hour thing, and they can pick and choose from, a growing list of topics. So we want it to be as flexible as possible. It's also a great HR tool. So HR facilitators can just act as discussion leaders as opposed to content experts. And it's sort of a program in a box that they can just take and use right away without being a content expert. So they're very flexible and adaptable.
Yeah, it looks like it. And it looks like it's serving the greater need for all of us, especially now. It seems as the anxiety and the stress level rises, whether it's global events or something like COVID, there are also reactions to it that also seem to permeate and populate programs such as yours, finding more and more people into meditation and yoga, and at least more and more people being aware of self-awareness, which can help. It's just a matter of it feels like it's always balancing out, and when the forces on the side creating the stress being reactionary, and I have to throw social media into that. There's definitely good things about social media, but it also has created so much stress and awareness because we're seeing so much in real time, a lot of which is not factual, and people treat it like they're facts, the sky is falling kind of thing. Do you address within the program somehow or in your own practices how to deal with social media and how to recognize, I guess on a meditative level, seeing the threat, seeing the anxiety, which sort of robs it of some of its power? Basically, I'm throwing a lot at you, but can you weigh in on social media and its effect on anxiety and whether that's addressed in these programs?
Yeah, we don't address social media specifically, but it is just part of the noise that is anxiety and stress provoking in each of us. So social media is basically a stimulus, right? Or an antecedent, as it's called in cognitive behavioral therapy. And that antecedent can cause us to feel stressed or sad or angry. That's our behavior, or that's what we do with it. And then we might then act out, say something, do something, overeat, overdrink, overshop, whatever. And then there's a consequence to that. And so just understanding that those have a relationship to each other, like what are my antecedents that cause me to overeat or, get angry and yell at people or rant on social media? And then what are the consequences by having that self-awareness, as you mentioned, and noticing it and identifying it, then we have the power then to change it. Because when it's flying beneath our radar, we're just being reactive with our reptilian brain like amoeba. But by engaging our consciousness with it and our intentions, we can say, I don't really like the consequences of this. What's causing it? And then what can I do in between? So our relationship well-being, there's a reason why we have 3 versions of it, because it's so critical. We go through this kind of process, and we ask people to attend to it every week. And some of the things that we can do to change our behavior is to change our beliefs and perspectives about that antecedent or that stimulus. So I could say that person was being really mean to me, but by being mindful, which creates more space for me to be aware and to plan something different, by examining my belief and questioning it, maybe finding a different way to think about it, can change my belief and then my behavior, and then change the consequence. And that's all it is, it sounds easy in practice. Of course, it's harder, but it starts with that awareness and a willingness to try something different and practice and experiment. And, in the end, like everybody has to develop their own process and formula. Yours is going to look different from mine. And so when we just intellectualize these processes and we skip over the actual practices, well, no wonder it doesn't cause behavioral change. So having that discipline or the structure to go through these exercises with ourselves and the awareness and trying different things and observing different consequences is what can help us develop these healthier habits. So it is beneficial to do it with a partner or a group so that there's the consistency and structure and accountability. But that was a great question, Jay, and it applies to everything in our life, not just social media.
And there's a couple things you keep mentioning that I find really interesting. One is one of my favorite words ever, and that's practice. Everything is a practice, whether it's mindful eating. I mean, even if it's addiction, practice of addiction makes the addiction worse. But the practice of accomplishing anything, especially when it comes to self-awareness or wellness, is work. It's not just, I heard an interview recently with a meditation facilitator, and the person he was talking to was not a meditator, and they got on the subject, and the guy who doesn't meditate said, well, the idea of meditation is to completely clear your mind, right? And the guy said, actually, no, it's the opposite. There's always a lot going on in your mind and around you. The challenge is to identify it and see it and lean into it, thereby robbing it of its power. Now, we mentioned social media, that was, of course, social media is kind of the dragon. It's the big identifiable evil that we can all point to. But what do you think are some of the biggest obstacles when it comes to, and this is the other thing that you mentioned, doing these practices with a partner or a class, because then you're accountable, ironically, also referencing back to your whole relationships theme and your relationships mission. What are some of the obstacles you see most commonly to having healthy relationships, whether it's with yourself or others?
That's a great question. I think it has to do with that self-awareness again, Jay. And because, I can just use myself as my own example, because I was probably pretty terrible about being in relationships when I was young, as probably, many of us are. But I didn't know what I didn't know. And I didn't realize how I was contributing to relationship dysfunction and discord. How my beliefs about the way things were, or the way things ought to be, were, I was allowing that to affect the relationship without any awareness at all. So I'll just give a really simple example. Those of us who grew up in this country, myself included, were raised on this fairy tale theme of fantasy of, the hardest part of being in a love relationship is finding Prince Charming, and then you live happily ever after. Well, that's just a huge fallacy. And I think it's a damaging myth, because The truth is that a good relationship takes effort. And not only in terms of getting to know the other person and how they're different from you and learning and honoring and respecting that. And, but also just getting to know ourselves, because there's so much about ourselves that we don't know. In terms of like our shadow work, our subconscious, the parts of ourselves that we are unaware of, which is vast. And we can let those issues interfere with our ability to create good relationships. They hijack us in ways that we are unaware of. And so until we're aware of them and that we are willing to recognize them and heal them, they're going to just keep bubbling up like those dragons or demons or icebergs that they are. And I just truly believe that everybody is well-intentioned. Everybody has good intentions for the most part. And but yet we can't get along with each other. So if we just do that inner work for ourselves and learn to really listen to others, we can do much better.
That's really interesting. And it brings me to the subject of, to put it bluntly, fear, and how much fear plays a part, whether it's fear of the unknown, fear of lack of control. You know, the Stoics like to say there's a difference between accepting your fate and acquiescing to your reality. Accepting your fate means there's no point in getting upset about the things you cannot change. So be at peace with that. Whereas acquiescing to your reality is like, oh, well, I guess this is the way it is. This is the way it is. I give up. But so much of that fear is often rooted in ourselves, whether it's fear of the future or fear of what we think we should be. Now, with that in mind, does fear as a concept come up in your teaching much? And I know that's really broad, but you know, you talked about the things at work behind the scenes that we have no concept of that are dragging us down. How do you address fear in some of your programs?
Yeah, that's really astute, Jay. I'm glad you brought that up. So fear is part of the antecedent behavior and consequence that we talked about earlier. And oftentimes, the antecedent causes sort of a dysfunctional behavior because of a fear-based belief. Mm-hmm. So like I might say, oh, Jay didn't mention I was an Asian American and therefore he was disrespecting me. So that's a fear-based belief that's pretty rigid and probably subconscious. And so I'm going to be I end up being snippy on the air, and then he doesn't invite me back. And so, but if I'm not aware of that subconscious belief, it's just going to submarine my overall goals and intentions. So it is part of that process that we recommend. We start to help people identify those beliefs through this observation and experimentation, getting really, and also for mindfulness, because when we are watching our thoughts and feelings, then we can observe those fear-based beliefs. But to really get deeply into the fear-based belief, Jay, often requires a therapist, I think. We can do that to some degree on our own. And there's some great resources that I think we refer to in our module, including Emotional Alchemy, which I think is just a great book that discusses like the most common fear-based beliefs and what to do about it. She basically says, be mindful. But yeah, they're super important, and we all have them, and they tend to undermine what our real goals and objectives are. Our modules, they do many things, but they are not. I mean, for some people, they can do a deep dive, but for a lot of people, you might want to get some hand-holding either from the person who created the module with us or through a therapist.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because sometimes we tend to get in the weeds in conversations like this. And sometimes you need to bring in a professional. There are meditations and books and programs, but sometimes you absolutely need help to kind of peel away some of those layers. And I think we can probably file confirmation bias under that same heading of fear. We feel much more comfortable knowing what we already know and confirming what it is we think we know, not to be
Absolutely.
redundant.
Yes. I tend to be subject to that too, just like everybody else.
To jump around just a little bit, and before we go, I want to talk about some of your partnerships and also about the hub launch within Synapse. So don't let me get away before we talk about that. I've mentioned Synapse many times on this podcast, and they're a big part of what we do because there's so many people who are, doing good work while working, But I wanted to hit on something I saw on your website, and that's about, it's a blog post talking about why the world needs social workers. And obviously mental health is a big subject right now. Self-care, self-awareness, domestic abuse, things like that come up within the realm of social work. And I'm COVID isolationism, absolutely. And I'm always fascinated by the people, quite honestly, who are able to do that, because you've got to be at least somewhat self-aware, if not have a really thick skin and keeping your eye on the mission, keeping that horizon in focus, because I would think much like, a trauma doctor or nurse or someone like that in the trenches like that, helping people with their biggest problems, whether they're physical as a surgeon or emotional and spiritual or otherwise being a social worker. How can social workers protect themselves being on the front lines of other people's problems every day? If you could just kind of generally chime in on that.
Sure. I really appreciate that you brought up the frontline helpers and workers, and there's so many of them besides social workers, even just people who are doing caregiving for their children or loved ones. We have to take care of ourselves first. Those of us who are working on the front lines, if we completely deplete and drain ourselves, then we make ourselves susceptible to physical, emotional, and mental illness and trauma, and so on and so forth. So as you just going back to that self-awareness, Jay, is like knowing what you need to feed your mind, body, soul, and spirit, and your energy is super important, because if you're not feeding that, you won't have it to give to anybody else, and you yourself can fall susceptible. I read an article once that said that caregivers just have a higher mortality than the ones they care for. And so we're not going to do anybody any good if we succumb because we are giving beyond our ability. So there's a lot of, there's some great research on this as well about giving and taking. And it turns out the most successful people are those who give wisely. So they're generous, but they do it within the frame of what they are able to give in a healthy way. If you can give in a way that's a win-win, like the things that you love to do that energize you and inspire you, that's the best way of giving. If it's depleting for you to give, then find other pathways, find help or support, delegate it, outsource it, say no. You're not always able to, obviously, but also, doing the things, the activities, using your strengths, doing it in a way that is most in alignment with who you are and how you bring your gifts into the world will help nourish you.
You mentioned in there quickly saying no, but that is a massive thing that a lot of us just don't do. We sit around, back to the mental health aspect, we sit around resenting that everyone wants so much of us. And yet we don't simply say, I would love to help you, but I just can't. I'd be better served letting you find someone else than give you half of what I've got. That's such a huge thing, just to say no, I'm spread too thin.
Yeah. And then if you say yes to something you can't deliver on, then you might end up disappointing that person. So it's better to just be realistic, right, about what you can do and can't do.
We had a brief phone conversation before doing the podcast last week, and you mentioned, and I don't remember the time frame, but the Foundation for Family and Community Healing hasn't been around that long, right? When did you start the organization?
We started at the end of 2018 after I lost my sister and husband to cancer. Mm-hmm. So we're less than 4 years old. So we're in this beautiful growth phase where we are starting to secure partnerships and alliances to help get our learning modules out to communities who they feel would benefit from them. So it's been really wonderful. And, we're doing outreach to nonprofits, government agencies, especially those who are serving people in need and low-resourced communities. But we're also looking to serve the for-profit community. This is a wonderful HR tool, organizational learning for workers, and a tool for HR professionals to easily bring workshops into their community. We're also working internationally. So we've had our first pilot in Zambia, which went really well. And so we're racking up some successes, and we're really excited about the future and making an impact, not just in Central Virginia, but all around the world.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, only 4 years. And I'm looking at the website now. It looks amazingly well put together and very comprehensive. And I'll add quickly, it's at familyandcommunityhealing.org or healingedu.org. And go ahead and talk about some of the partnerships if you'd like, and how people can involve and partner with you, and some organizations that might want to consider partnering and how it can benefit them.
Yeah, so in addition to working with our content providers, because not all of those modules were provided by me, we also, as I mentioned, partner with organizations where they feel their communities would benefit from having access to our modules. So we have an organizational partnership with the City of Richmond Office of Community Wealth Building. So they have access to our modules for their 900 or so community members and their staff. And we have a partnership with Network to Work, which is a workforce development network that provides wraparound services to job seekers and people who are looking to advance in their workplaces. We're in partnership with the Hand Up Community Resource Center, which serves veterans through the Veterans Service Center, and I believe it's also the 9th District. And they're going to be opening up on the north side as well. And we just agreed to a partnership with the Circle Center Adult Day Center, which takes in elderly people for day services, and we have some other smaller partnerships around the region and now in Zambia, as I mentioned. We are looking for partnerships with schools and school districts, for-profit organizations, not nonprofits, and so forth, because again, we just really feel that this is a solution that our families and communities need, regardless of their ability to pay, and regardless of their location. So we would really love to hear from anybody who would like to bring this innovation into their community, or we invite people to just come to our website and try it out. Again, you can do it on your own for yourself or your family at healingedu.org. And we have a growing amount of content on a variety of subjects. The Navigating Anxiety module, I think, is probably of a lot of interest to people right now, as well as the one on happiness, like just how to create a thriving life for yourself. And we have a new module on 6 layers of joy. There's also a pretty new module called Hearing for Healing. I believe that so much of our conflict in our lives is because we are not really taught how to listen deeply to each other. So this walks you through some of the skills and practices to do that.
Yeah, there's so much there. And of course, you've got an extensive social media presence, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, all that. And a radio show on WRWK. The guy, Chris Maxwell, who began that, also started WRIR, the independent station. And with my radio background way back when, I volunteer at WRIR. I firmly believe in independent broadcast voices. So congratulations on that. Talk about your radio show a little bit and your blog on Psychology Today.
Okay, thanks. The radio show is called Finding Our Fit. It airs Thursdays at 5 p.m. at WRWK 93.9 FM. It also streams on their webpage, YouTube, and Facebook Live. And we talk about finding our relationship, creating a healthy relationship with everything and everybody in our lives. And oftentimes, as you mentioned, that includes ourselves, how to be in a healthy relationship with ourselves. And also Earth, because I feel like we are in a dysfunctional relationship with Earth, which to me is the reason we've not made more progress with climate change. I also have a blog on Psychology Today. Let's see, I forgot the name of it, but you could just Google it. It's also linked to on our webpage and social media. But I also write about these subjects. Right now, I'm writing about intimacy matters, and how to deepen your relationship with each other, but also with yourself first, because you can't share from the heart if you're not there listening to your heart.
I want to get to some of the other things you have going on, including the Synapse thing, but this just popped into my head. How important do you consider physical activity to mental health? And I ask that as someone, I do a lot of cycling events and fundraisers for cycling. And if I couldn't go get on my bike, at least preferably every day, but at least every couple days, and really it's a meditation, but it's also, you struggle, it's something to overcome each time. How do you consider the relationship with mental health and physical health?
Oh gosh, I'm glad you brought that up. There's a huge relationship, as you would imagine. I mean, of course, physical health is exercise and movement is important for your physical health. And if you don't have physical health, it's hard for you to do much of anything. But there's also quite a bit of research that just getting up and moving around, even if you're not cycling for 100 miles, like you probably do on a regular basis, improves blood flow to your brain, which will improve your cognitive ability and your creativity. And even just taking breaks, regular breaks, is really important because, I used to think, Jay, that just having a really active brain was a real asset, and I was really proud of it. But the truth is that our brains need rest too. And when we're not actively thinking and problem solving, or reading something on social media, that our brains, when they have that downtime, can do a lot of creative work in the background. So even that brain rest is also important. So, and our bodies need rest too. So engagement, exercise, and rest are important for our bodies and our mind for us to be functioning at our optimum.
Yeah, it's a big part of my life. Let's talk about the Synapse Hub that you're launching. Synapse is the networking group that revolves around community engagement and primarily nonprofits. So it's the business community, a lot of small business owners, entrepreneurs, but it's also the nonprofit community. And in keeping with the theme of the growth of your organization and the outreach of your organization, Synapse is now all over the country and several other countries, including Ireland and Uganda, parts of Africa. So talk about the hub that you're launching. And incidentally, guests can come if they go to the Synapse website and sign up. So this is not an exclusive event, but talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. Thanks for bringing that up. So we're pretty new to this Synapse community, which is just a beautiful model where the meetings are focused around nonprofits. And so when a nonprofit has a regular meeting, it's called a hub. So we finally are launching our own hub. It's called Hub 002. So we were given a great number. And we're going to have our launch party on September 13th at 4 p.m. at Brambley Park. But it's also a hybrid. So if you want to just join us by Zoom, please join in. And as Jay said, you don't have to be a Synapse member to attend. Thereafter, we're going to be meeting the second and fourth Tuesdays at 4 p.m. At one of our board members' law offices near Willow Lawn. And it's a great way to just stay in touch with what the foundation is up to, but also meet the wonderful people who are part of the Synapse community. It's really a group of very generous, talented people such as yourself. And we would love to see you there or at any other Synapse event.
Well, I'm actually the hub leader over at the McShin Hub number 12. And McShin is an organization that advocates and helps people in recovery and tries to overcome addiction. And they run a number of sober houses and resources like that. So maybe we can do a joint meeting sometime, which within Synapse is called a Hubba Hubba.
I would just love that. I so admire the McShin Foundation.
Yeah, and I see a lot of complementary aspects of the two organizations between you and McShin. So that'd be fun, I think.
Yeah, and it's just wonderful that you're the hub master, right, for McShin?
Right.
Yeah, the hub leader.
Yeah.
Our hub leader is Arthur Brill, this brilliant sculptor in Ashland. So, the hubs would not work without the hub leader. So thank you for your willingness to support a nonprofit.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The McShin is close to my family's heart, but they actually took a step back for a minute. So now they're coming back into the fold within Synapse. So it's exciting. So we'll have to do one of those. But Susanna, I don't want to let you go until I give you the opportunity to hit on anything we may have missed. We can't solve it all in these sessions, but I like to open it up in case there's anything you want to mention, like an event. Oh, I don't think we talked about the event in November that you have coming up. But anything else you'd like to mention?
Yeah, thanks. So we are having our first official fundraiser event on November 18th, due to the generosity of the Crossroads Art Center. So thank you, Crossroads. It's going to be a silent auction that evening. And so we would love to have you attend, and or if anybody out there has anything they'd like to donate to the foundation for the silent auction, we'd very much appreciate that. We have a great lineup of items for auction, very much due to the generosity of the Rotary Club, who's going to be partnering with us. So we'd love to see you there, and as well as on our platform. We just invite everybody to peruse our modules and partake in any way you feel so inclined. And it's the skills to change your life and change your family and communities as well. Again, we're at healingedu.org, and we'd love to talk with you if your community would like to bring this innovation into your organization and empower your learners to thrive together.
Very cool. Very cool. We'll all put all this information, the links that we mentioned and the events on the website at goodeyepodcast.com. But until then, healingedu.org is where everybody can find you. Susanna Calvert of the Foundation for Family and Community Healing. Thanks for stopping by and being here on the Good Eye Podcast, and thanks for all your work.
Thank you for your beautiful work, Jay, and I appreciate the chance to speak with you and your listeners today.
Thanks very much to Susanna for making some time, and thanks for her attention and intention on this edition of the Good Eye Podcast. All the links and stuff we talked about will be on the website at goodeyepodcast.com. You can subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, whatever. And we're on the requisite socials as well, including Facebook and Instagram, et cetera, et cetera. So if you want to get on the show, if you got something interesting, curious, intellectually stimulating, healthy, etc., hit me up at goodeyepodcast@gmail.com, and we'll see what we can do. So thanks till next time. Thanks for listening, and thank you for your time, attention, and intention here on today's Good Eye Podcast.